November 23rd, 1955, Tuesday, noon, New York, Harlem. Louis Armstrong walked into Charlie's diner just like he did every Tuesday, but this time, everything was different. The owner, Charlie Williams, an old war veteran and Louis's friend of 20 years, stood by the door. His hands were shaking. His face was pale. The moment Charlie saw Louis, he rushed over. "Louis, you should leave today. Please." Louis stopped. Charlie never talked like this. "Why? What happened?" Charlie looked around nervously. There were only a few customers in the diner, but they were all silent. Everyone was waiting for something. "Louis, please. Don't be here today. Some people are coming, and they won't want you here." Louis looked into Charlie's eyes and saw something he'd never seen before. Fear. Charlie Williams had fought in World War II at Normandy. He'd faced enemy fire with courage, but now he was afraid. Louis put his hand on Charlie's shoulder. "Charlie, I'm not going anywhere. You're my brother. If there's trouble, we'll handle it together." Charlie shook his head. "Louis, this time it's different. These people, they're dangerous." Louis smiled, but it wasn't his stage smile. This was something else. Determination. "Charlie, I'm dangerous too, but not with weapons, with words." 10 minutes later, the door opened, and the men who walked in proved Charlie's fear was justified, but nobody knew that Louis Armstrong would be there that day, and that changed everything. Before we continue with this powerful story, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You're about to witness one of the most courageous moments in Louis Armstrong's life, a moment that has never been told until today. Let's dive deeper into what really happened that November afternoon in Harlem. The information in this video is compiled from documented interviews, archival news, books, and historical reports. For narrative purposes, some parts are dramatized and may not represent 100% factual accuracy. We also use AI-assisted visuals and AI narration for cinematic reconstruction. The use of AI does not mean the story is fake. It is a storytelling tool. Our goal is to recreate the spirit of that era as faithfully as possible. Enjoy watching. To understand what happened that Tuesday, we need to go back 6 weeks earlier, October 10th, 1955. Louis Armstrong was at the peak of his career. His performances sold out everywhere. His records topped charts, and his name was known worldwide. But success never changed Louis. Every Tuesday, without fail, he would visit Charlie's diner in Harlem. Not because it was fancy or famous, but because Charlie Williams was his friend. And for Louis Armstrong, friendship meant everything. Charlie's diner was a small place, maybe 20 tables, simple wooden chairs, checkered tablecloths. Nothing special to look at. But the food was honest, the atmosphere was warm, and Charlie treated everyone with dignity. That was what mattered to Louis. He could have eaten at the finest restaurants in Manhattan where celebrities and millionaires dined, but every Tuesday, he chose Charlie's. Because 20 years earlier, when Louis was still fighting for recognition, when white America didn't want to give a black jazz musician the respect he deserved, Charlie had been there. Their friendship started in 1935. Louis was performing at a small club in Harlem when a group of troublemakers tried to start a fight. Charlie, just back from military service, had stepped in. He didn't care that Louis was famous, he just saw a man who needed help. That night created a bond that lasted 2 decades. Louis never forgot that moment, and Charlie never asked for anything in return. That was the foundation of their friendship: respect, loyalty, and mutual dignity. But in October 1955, Charlie's world began to crumble. It started with small things. A broken window that nobody could explain. Graffiti on the diner's wall. Trash dumped by the entrance every morning. Charlie cleaned it up, repainted the wall, fixed the window. But he knew. These weren't random acts. Someone was sending a message. Then on October 17th, 3 men walked into the diner. They wore expensive suits, polished shoes, confident smiles, but their eyes were cold. The leader, a man named Vincent, sat at the counter. He ordered coffee but didn't drink it. Instead, he looked around the diner slowly, deliberately. Charlie felt his stomach tighten. He'd seen men like this before. During the war, he'd learned to recognize danger. These men carried it like cologne. "Nice place you got here, Mr. Williams," Vincent said, his voice smooth. "Real nice. Clean. Good food. Lots of customers." Charlie nodded, his throat dry. "Thank you." Vincent smiled. "Be a shame if something happened to it. You know how it is. Accidents happen. Fires, break-ins, vandalism, dangerous neighborhood." Charlie understood immediately. This wasn't small talk. This was a threat wrapped in politeness. "What do you want?" Charlie asked quietly. Vincent's smile widened. "Protection. We provide security services for businesses in this area. Make sure nothing bad happens. Very reasonable rates. $100 a month." $100. That was a quarter of Charlie's monthly income, money he needed to feed his family, pay rent, keep the diner running. But Charlie also knew what saying no meant. He'd heard stories about other business owners who refused. Their places burned down, their families got threatened, the police never found who did it, or maybe they just didn't look hard enough. "I'll think about it," Charlie said, trying to buy time. Vincent stood up. "You do that, Mr. Williams. We'll come back next week for your answer. And Mr. Williams," he leaned close, "think carefully. You fought for this country. Be ashamed if you couldn't enjoy what you fought for." After they left, Charlie sat alone in his empty diner. His hands were shaking. His wife Sarah had asked him that night, "What's wrong?" Charlie couldn't tell her. He couldn't put that fear into words. The next week, Vincent returned. This time, Charlie paid. He had no choice. $100 in cash. Vincent counted it slowly, then smiled. "Smart decision, Mr. Williams. We'll be back next month. Same time, same amount." For 6 weeks, Charlie lived with this secret. He didn't tell Sarah the full truth. He didn't tell his children, and he definitely didn't tell Louis. Because Charlie was ashamed. He'd fought against tyranny overseas. He'd risked his life for freedom. And now, in his own neighborhood, in his own business, he was being victimized. The irony burned like acid. Louis noticed something was wrong during their Tuesday lunches. Charlie seemed distracted. His usual warmth felt forced. His laughter sounded hollow. One Tuesday in early November, Louis asked directly, "Charlie, you okay? You seem different." Charlie forced a smile. "Just tired, Louis. Business keeping me busy." Louis didn't push. He respected his friend's privacy. But he filed that observation away. Something was definitely wrong. What Louis didn't know was that the situation was getting worse. Vincent's visits became more frequent. Sometimes he'd come just to sit and stare, reminding Charlie who was in control. Other times he'd make small demands. "Coffee needs to be fresh when we arrive." "We want that table reserved for us," Charlie complied. Every demand felt like a small death of his dignity. And the worst part? His regular customers started noticing. The diner's atmosphere changed. People felt the tension. Some stopped coming. Business declined, which meant Charlie had even less money to pay the monthly amount. It was a vicious cycle designed to break him. By mid-November, Charlie was desperate. He considered going to the police, but he knew better. In 1955, Harlem, police rarely helped black business owners, especially against connected white men. Charlie thought about closing the diner, walking away. But this was his livelihood, his dream, his legacy. He'd bought it with his military savings after the war. Every table, every chair represented years of sacrifice. He couldn't just abandon it. On November 20th, Vincent made a new demand. "Rent's going up, Mr. Williams, $150 from now on." Charlie's heart sank. He couldn't afford that. "I can't pay that much," he said quietly. Vincent's expression hardened. "Then we have a problem. Because if you can't pay, we can't guarantee your safety. And accidents, Mr. Williams, accidents happen to people who don't cooperate." That night, Charlie didn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling trapped. He thought about his children, his wife, the diner. Everything he'd built was crumbling, and he felt powerless to stop it. November 22nd, Monday, Louis called Charlie to confirm their Tuesday lunch. Charlie almost told him not to come, but he couldn't do it. Louis's weekly visit was the one bright spot in his increasingly dark world. That night, Charlie decided, tomorrow when Louis arrived, he would tell him everything. Maybe Louis could give advice, maybe just talking about it would help. Charlie didn't expect Louis to fix anything, he just needed someone to understand. But then Monday evening, Vincent called the diner. "Tomorrow, noon, we'll be there to collect, and Mr. Williams, make sure nobody else is around. This is private business." The threat was clear. If Louis was there, it could cause problems. Charlie spent that whole night trying to figure out what to do. Should he cancel with Louis? Should he close the diner for the day? But both options felt like surrender. And Charlie Williams might have been afraid, but he wasn't a coward. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt trapped, where every option seemed impossible? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. November 23rd arrived, Tuesday morning. Charlie opened the diner at 6 as usual. He went through the motions mechanically, brewing coffee, preparing food, cleaning tables. But his mind was elsewhere. At 11:30, Louis arrived. Right on time, like always. He walked in with that famous Louis Armstrong smile, trumpet case in one hand. "Charlie, how's the best chef in Harlem?" Charlie's heart broke. Louis's genuine warmth contrasted so sharply with Vincent's cold threats. For a moment, Charlie considered lying, pretending everything was fine, but he couldn't do it. "Louis, listen," Charlie said urgently. "Today's not good. You should go." Louis's smile faded. "What's going on?" Charlie pulled him aside, voice low. "Some men are coming. They want money, and if you're here—" He trailed off. Louis's expression changed. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. He'd seen this before, in New Orleans, in Chicago. Everywhere he'd lived, men with power preyed on those without it. "What kind of men?" Louis asked calmly. Charlie hesitated, then quietly said, "The kind that don't ask twice." Louis understood immediately. This wasn't just about money. This was about control, intimidation, breaking a good man's spirit, everything Louis hated. "Charlie, how long has this been going on?" Charlie's defenses crumbled. 6 weeks. I've been paying, but they keep wanting more, and today—" His voice broke. Louis put his hand on Charlie's shoulder. In that moment, he made a decision that was vintage Louis Armstrong, bold, compassionate, and absolutely fearless when it came to standing up for what was right. "Charlie, I'm staying." Charlie's eyes widened. "Louis, no! These people are dangerous. You don't understand." Louis's voice was firm but gentle. "Charlie, I understand perfectly, and I'm not leaving my friend to face this alone. When do they arrive?" Charlie checked the clock. 11:45. "Any minute now." Louis nodded. He took off his coat, sat at his usual table, and folded his hands calmly. To anyone watching, he looked completely relaxed. But inside, Louis's mind was working. He'd spent 50 years navigating a world that tried to diminish him. He'd faced racism, exploitation, condescension. He'd learned when to bend and when to stand firm. Today was a day to stand firm. Charlie paced nervously. The few customers in the diner sensed something was wrong. The air felt heavy. At 11:55, the door opened. 3 men walked in. Vincent led the way, followed by 2 larger men who looked like they could break furniture with their hands. Vincent's eyes immediately found Charlie. Then they swept the room and landed on Louis Armstrong. Vincent stopped. For just a second, his confident expression faltered. Because everyone in America knew Louis Armstrong's face. He was on television, in magazines, on records. Vincent had probably heard Louis's music on the radio. And now, here he was, sitting calmly in Charlie's diner. Vincent recovered quickly. He walked to the counter, ignoring Louis, and said to Charlie, "We need to talk, privately." Charlie's voice shook. "Whatever you have to say, you can say here." Vincent's jaw tightened. "This is business, Mr. Williams. Private business." That's when Louis spoke. His voice was calm, friendly even, but it carried weight. "Seems to me, if it's business in this diner, it concerns Charlie's friend too, and I'm his friend." Vincent turned to Louis. Up close, the contrast was stark. Vincent, young, arrogant, used to intimidating people. Louis, in his mid-50s, smile lines around his eyes, but something unshakable in his gaze. "This doesn't concern you," Vincent said. Louis smiled, but it wasn't his performance smile. "My friend is concerned. That makes it my concern." One of the larger men stepped forward. "You should leave, old man." The room went silent. Charlie held his breath. Nobody talked to Louis Armstrong like that. But Louis didn't react with anger. Instead, he did something unexpected. He laughed. Not mockingly, genuinely. "Old man," Louis repeated, amused, "I've been called worse. But let me tell you something, son. I've played in juke joints where men carried more than harsh words. I've performed in places where the danger was real. And I'm still here, still standing, still playing my trumpet. You know why?" The young man didn't answer. Louis continued, his voice still calm. "Because I learned something a long time ago. The loudest person in the room is usually the most afraid." Vincent tried to regain control. "Look, Mr. Armstrong, we respect you, your music, your talent. But this is business. It has nothing to do with you." Louis leaned back in his chair. "Business. That's an interesting word. See, I know about business. I've worked with club owners, record producers, managers. Real business is about mutual benefit. Both sides win. But what you're doing to my friend Charlie here, that's not business. That's something else entirely. Vincent's face hardened. Careful, Mr. Armstrong. You're a celebrity, but that doesn't make you untouchable. Louis's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. You're right. I'm not untouchable, but I am visible. Very visible. Millions of people know my face, my name. If something happened to me, if I came to harm, it would be news, big news. And people would ask questions. They'd investigate. They'd want to know who and why. So let me ask you, do you want that kind of attention? The room was completely silent. Vincent's jaw muscles worked. He hadn't expected this. Most people backed down when threatened. But Louis Armstrong wasn't most people. Louis stood up slowly. He wasn't a tall man, but in that moment he seemed to fill the room. Let me tell you about Charlie Williams. He fought in World War II, Normandy. He risked his life so people like you could live free. He came home and built this diner with his own hands, every table, every chair. He serves good food, treats people with respect, and asks for nothing but the chance to work honestly. And you come here, threaten him, demand money he doesn't have, and call it business? Louis walked closer to Vincent, not aggressively, but deliberately. I grew up in New Orleans, poorest neighborhood you can imagine. My mother worked herself to exhaustion cleaning white people's houses. She was exploited, disrespected, paid almost nothing. I watched her dignity get chipped away every single day. And you know what I promised myself? That when I had a voice, I'd use it. When I had a platform, I'd stand up, not just for myself, but for people like Charlie, good people, honest people, people who deserve better. Vincent tried to interrupt, but Louis held up his hand. I'm not finished. You think you have power because you can threaten a small business owner, because you can intimidate someone who has less than you. But that's not real power. Real power is what Charlie has. The power to build something from nothing, the power to serve his community, the power to maintain dignity in the face of people who want to take it away. Louis's voice softened, but the intensity remained. I'm going to make you an offer. You walk out that door right now. You leave Charlie alone. You forget this diner exists, and I forget this conversation happened. No police, no press, no publicity. You just walk away. Vincent's face was red. And if we don't, Louis smiled, a real smile. Then tomorrow I call every newspaper in New York. I tell them Louis Armstrong witnessed intimidation in Harlem. I name names, I describe faces, I make this national news, and suddenly people you answer to, people who prefer to stay in shadows, they're in spotlights. How do you think they'll feel about that? The two larger men shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. Shaking down small business owners was easy. Going up against Louis Armstrong, one of America's most beloved entertainers, was something else entirely. Vincent's mind was racing. He'd been sent to collect money, but nobody had prepared him for this scenario. If he backed down, he'd look weak. But if he pushed forward and this became public, the consequences could be severe. Louis seemed to read his thoughts. I know what you're thinking. You're worried about looking weak. But let me tell you something I learned in the music business. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Nobody in this room will talk about what happened here. Charlie gets to keep running his diner. You avoid a public scandal, everybody wins. That's real business. The standoff lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like forever. Finally, Vincent made his decision. He turned to his men. Let's go. One of them looked confused. But boss, the money... Vincent cut him off with a look. I said, let's go. As they walked toward the door, Vincent paused. He looked at Louis, then at Charlie. For just a moment, his facade cracked. Maybe he saw himself in a different light. Maybe he felt something close to shame. Or maybe he just recognized that this was a battle he couldn't win. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Louis's response was simple. Yes, it is. After they left, the diner remained silent for a full minute. Then one of the customers, an elderly woman who'd watched everything, started clapping. Then another joined. Then everyone. Charlie stood there, tears streaming down his face. Louis walked over and hugged his friend. It's over, Charlie. They won't be back. And they weren't. Word spread quickly in that particular circle. Louis Armstrong had personally intervened. He'd stood up to them. And everyone understood what that meant. Going after Charlie's Diner now would bring attention nobody wanted. The risk was too high. Charlie never paid protection money again. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and share this video. Louis Armstrong's courage deserves to be remembered and celebrated. But the impact of that Tuesday went far beyond Charlie's Diner. In the weeks that followed, other small business owners in Harlem heard the story. It gave them courage. Some went to the police. Some banded together for mutual protection. The culture of silent fear began to crack. Louis never sought publicity for what he did. He didn't give interviews about it. He didn't use it to boost his image. For him, it was simply what friends do for each other. But Charlie never forgot. He lived another 30 years, running his diner successfully until retirement. And every Tuesday, Louis Armstrong had a reserved table. The best seat in the house, completely free. Louis always insisted on paying, but Charlie refused. "You gave me something worth more than money," Charlie would say. "You gave me my dignity back." In 1971, when Louis passed away, Charlie attended the funeral. He was one of the few non-family members allowed in the private section. At the reception, someone asked Charlie how he knew Louis. Charlie smiled through his tears and told the story of that November Tuesday. The person listening, a journalist, asked why this story was never public. Charlie's answer was pure Louis Armstrong. Because Louis didn't do it for the story. He did it because it was right. That's who he was. Not the celebrity, not the performer. Just a good man who used his voice when it mattered most. Today, Charlie's Diner is gone. The building was torn down in the 1980s, but in Harlem, older residents still remember it. Some remember the food, some remember the atmosphere, but everyone who knew remembered that November day when Louis Armstrong stood up to men who thought power meant preying on the vulnerable. This story is a reminder that courage isn't about physical strength. It's about standing up when you'd rather sit down. It's about using whatever platform you have, whatever voice you possess, to defend those who need defending. Louis Armstrong could have walked out of that diner. He could have avoided confrontation. He had nothing to gain and potentially something to lose. But he stayed. Because Charlie was his friend. Because exploitation was wrong. Because silence in the face of injustice is complicity. In his long career, Louis Armstrong faced racism, discrimination, and dismissal. He navigated a world that wanted to enjoy his music but deny him basic dignity. He could have become bitter. He could have withdrawn. Instead, he became more compassionate, more willing to stand up, more committed to using his success to lift others. The men who walked into Charlie's Diner that day expected an easy target. They got Louis Armstrong instead. They expected fear. They found courage. They expected submission. They encountered dignity. And in that confrontation, something shifted. Not just for Charlie, but for everyone who witnessed it or heard about it later. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person refusing to look away. One person saying, "Not today, not here, not to my friend." Louis Armstrong was that person, not because he was famous, not because he was wealthy, but because he remembered where he came from. He remembered his mother's struggles. He remembered being young and powerless, and he'd made a promise to himself that when he had the power to speak, he would use it for those who couldn't speak for themselves. As the sun set on November 23, 1955, Louis Armstrong walked out of Charlie's Diner the same way he walked in, with his trumpet case in one hand and a smile on his face. But something had changed. Not in Louis. He'd always been this person. What changed was Charlie's world. The weight he'd carried for 6 weeks was gone. The fear that had stolen his sleep had vanished. And in its place was something Vincent and his men couldn't take away. Hope, dignity. The knowledge that friendship, real friendship, means standing together when it matters most. That Tuesday lunch became legendary in a quiet way. No headlines, no television coverage, just a story passed from person to person. A story about a jazz legend who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Or maybe it wasn't coincidence. Maybe Louis Armstrong made a habit of being in the right place, doing the right thing, standing with the right people. Not for applause, not for recognition, but because his mother, Mary Ann Armstrong, had taught him something fundamental. That no matter how high you rise, you never forget where you came from, and you never turn your back on someone who needs you. Tonight, somewhere, someone is facing their own version of Vincent. Someone is being exploited, threatened, pushed into a corner, and they need their own Louis Armstrong, someone to stand beside them and say, "Not today." Maybe that person is you. Maybe you have a voice that needs to be used, a platform that needs to be leveraged, a moment of courage that needs to be seized. Louis Armstrong didn't have superpowers. He couldn't stop bullets or bend steel. All he had was his name, his presence, and his willingness to stand up. But on that November Tuesday, that was enough, more than enough. It was everything, and somewhere, in the great beyond, Louis Armstrong is smiling, not his stage smile, his real smile, the one he saved for moments when he knew he'd done the right thing, the one that said, "Today I made a difference." And he did. Not just for Charlie Williams, but for everyone who heard this story and found the courage to stand up in their own moment of truth. That's Louis Armstrong's real legacy. Not just the music, though that was magnificent. Not just the performances, though they were legendary. But the moments like this, quiet, private, powerful, when a man with everything to lose chose to stand with a friend who had nothing left, and in doing so, reminded us all what true courage looks like, what real friendship means, and why sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to walk away when walking away would be easier. That was Louis Armstrong, the world's kindest heart, humanity's truest voice. And on November 23, 1955, he was exactly where he needed to be, standing with Charlie Williams, facing down fear and winning a victory that no newspaper covered but everyone who mattered remembered. Forever.